Hello everyone, my name is Voya and welcome to My Deep Guide. Today we're taking an in-depth look into the Boox Note 3, the latest edition and the latest and most powerful 10.3-inch e-ink device from Boox. So let's check it out. And here it is. So Boox Note 3 is the latest 10.3-inch in the latest series of the refreshed type of devices from Boox. Note 2 came out relatively recently, and recently enough to actually warrant the comparison between the Note 2 and Note 3, and it's like, why does Note 3 exist and what's the point? And furthermore, to confuse the line a little bit more and make the job of the buyer a little bit more difficult, we also have the Note Air as another 10.3-inch device. So currently from Boox, you're able to buy the older Note 2, you're able to buy this one, Note 3, and you're also able to buy the Note Air. And all three of these devices have very similar type of on-paper capabilities, performance, and hardware specifications, and also they all sport a 10.3-inch screen. However, there are differences that I think are important to actually keep in mind. So while I'm going to be focusing, of course, mainly on the Note 3, I will also be talking about and comparing with the Note Air and with the Note 2, so that the viewers can actually decide which one's the best for them and to maybe clarify some of the things. So without any question, Note 3 is the most powerful 10.3-inch tablet currently in the Boox range. So it surpassed the previous Note 2, and it is a little bit more powerful than the Note Air. But before I get into the specifications and all that kind of stuff, I just want to talk about the design. And the design on the outside is pretty much identical as the Note 2. It's the same type of frame, it's the same type of shell, it has the same thickness, same battery, everything really the same, down to the weight. Even the weight is like 378 grams weight. So if you've owned Note 2, then you know exactly how Note 3 feels like. And how does it feel like? Well, it feels great. I mean, it's a really high quality kind of manufacturing and really good materials, and you can actually feel a little bit of an improvement in their in their manufacturing and everything that they've been doing since Note 2. Basically, it just feels a little bit more put together and everything like that. So that's a good thing. The signature thing is, of course, this bottom stripe here, which is now present throughout the entire range, except for the misfit, which is the Note Air. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So how does the Note 2 and the Note 3 feel? Because they are pretty much identical. Well, they have this portrait format, and if that's what you're looking for, and if that's something that you prefer, then great. That's something that I think people are divided like half and half. Half of people will actually prefer this type of a taller format, and half of people will prefer the wider format of an asymmetrical side of the Note Air. Either way, at 7.1 millimeters thick or thin, it's not the thinnest of the devices, but it's not a thick device at all. However, when you compare it to the Note Air's 5.8 millimeters, yes, there is most definitely a difference. The second thing is that we have these kind of rounded edges, which are a standard on all of the devices, but there was always, even when I used Note 2, it was something that, and it's just a personal preference, because I know that quite a lot of users say, oh, this really doesn't bother me at all, but some users also agree with me and say, yeah, this kind of bothers me a bit. The weight distribution, even though it is 378 grams, which is definitely lighter than the Note Air, the combined thickness and the roundedness of these corners, even though they're beautifully rounded and everything like that, it's just that this kind of design, that we have a round corner here and a relatively sharper sharper edges here, not sharp, but kind of less rounded edges, you tend to use this type of a device like this, and then the weight does tend to press a little bit here. So by no means is the device uncomfortable, not at all. This is just a personal preference. I like the, since I've had Note Air, I do prefer that ability to hold it completely on one side, and I've actually grown accustomed to that. So it's just something that you may want to keep in mind when deciding between the Note Air and Note 3. Other than that, everything is pretty much great. I mean, excellent quality, everything is the way you would expect it for a very hefty price, which is $550 with the flip cover included. So pricey device, but then again you get the most powerful 10.3-inch e-ink device currently on the market. So yeah. So the design is consistent throughout the whole line. That has this grayish type of line down there. We have a power button on top, nothing on either of the sides, and everything else that you need is on the bottom, such as USB-C, microphone. Note 3 has dual speakers like Max Lumi, so stereo output. And at the bottom we have the button, which also doubles as a fingerprint reader for locking and unlocking your device. Overall, there's nothing really tremendously new about the design, so nothing much new to say about it. It's great and it works, and if you liked Note 2, I think you'll like Note 3 even more, because I think the stripe really works and the craftsmanship and the materials are a tiny little bit better, or at least they feel a little bit better. Now let's talk about the specifications, and here's where things get a little bit kind of tricky for the consumers, mainly because the CPU has been upgraded on the entire Boox series, but some of the users get confused by the lower turbo frequency of the new octa-core CPU, as the last generation Note 2, Nova 2 and Max 3, they all sported the octa-core CPU, which maxed out at 2 GHz. However, the new series has an upgraded octa-core which maxes out up to 1.8 GHz. Now, on the paper that should be like slower, right? But not really, because it's a better technology, it's more efficient, and not only is it more battery efficient, but it's actually able to more efficiently utilize the megahertz that it has. So the end result is that it should be as fast or a little bit faster than the previous generation of devices. Now, since I don't have Note 2 here anymore, I can't do a direct comparison with this one, but I do have Nova 2 and I do have a Nova 3 as well, and all of them are using the same type of stuff. So I will be able to benchmark those two, and that should give us a good enough of an idea of where the new series lies as far as the power efficiency goes. However, on the specs side of things, it has an upgraded octa-core CPU. It has 4 GB of LPDDR4 RAM, which is much better and more efficient than the old LPDDR3 RAM that you could find on Note 2. And it also, most importantly, only Max Lumi and the Note 3 have the new UFS 2.1 standard of upgraded flash RAM, which is the 64 GB of ROM, and it should allow for overall snappier performance, faster loading times of large files, and generally speaking, better battery efficiency. So internally, it's also sporting the same exact battery as the Note 2, 4,300 milliamps. So these kind of refreshments from the hardware side of things, even though on paper they might not sound like a huge upgrade, when you put it all together as a system, it should be maybe a little bit more faster, but certainly way more efficient than the previous generation of devices. And that's a good thing, because it is an upgrade. So yeah, for me, it's a refreshment of the system, and as such, if the benchmarks on the Nova 2 and Nova 3 show what I expect them to show, then it definitely makes sense. Furthermore, we still have Wi-Fi 2.4 and 5 GHz support, but also this time we're upgraded to Bluetooth 5.0. And the second biggest advantage of the refreshment of the system is that even though now all of the series, the Note 2, Nova 2, and Poco 2, they all now have OS version 3, they're still running Android 9, while the Note 3 from this new series and the Nova 3 and everybody else, they are running Android 10. Automatically, the longevity of the device when it has an Android 10, it's a really good thing. Now, the question does arise here: if the Note 2 was upgraded to OS version 3, but it stays on Android 9, will it ever be upgraded to Android 10? I don't know. And that's something that definitely warrants a question and a little bit of clarification from Boox, because, I mean, let's not forget, the Poco 2 was launched, Poco 2 and Nova 2 were launched earlier this year, and now we have a refreshment of the system. So I think it would be only fair if the older devices would also get that upgrade to the Android 10 system and not just have the OS version 2, version 3, because that longevity, the hardware definitely can do it, and the longevity of the system is a nice thing to actually have. So yeah, that's at least my 2 cents as far as this whole thing goes. One more thing that is different between Note 2 and Note 3 is that while Note 2 supported only digital audio, Note 3 supports analog and digital audio, which means that I think that the USB-C on the bottom here can also use USB headphones or the converter, if you might have that. So that's another difference that's there. Because of the nature of the design, it's using a Frontlight and a Mobius flexible screen. That means that there's going to be a bit of a distance between the surface that you're writing on and the actual screen. The same thing is present on the Note Air as well, and it was present on the Note 2 as well. However, since the original review when I did the Note 2, I think that Boox have introduced some really clever calibration, offsetting, and settings to actually compensate for that height difference, so that when you're writing, that the appearance of where you're writing looks like it is underneath the pen tip itself. That's something I'm going to be testing out here, and I certainly hope that it's the case here. It is the case on Note Air, and it is the case on the Nova 2, so we'll see if it translates on the Note 3 as well. But overall, spec-wise, yeah, this is pretty much the beefiest 10.3 e-ink tablet on the market today. And since we're mentioning Note 3 and Note Air as well, it's worth mentioning the differences in the specifications between the two, I think. So they run the same type of CPU. Note Air has 3 gigabytes of the same LPDDR4 type of RAM. However, it does not have the faster ROM. So it has the standard eMMC 32 gigabytes of ROM. So that means that not only is it half the capacity of Note 3, but it also runs that older type of technology, which is a little bit slower and less efficient than the one that you will get on the Note 3 and on Max Lumi. It also has a 3000 mAh battery, which is less than Note 3, and it does not have a button or a fingerprint reader. Other than that, the internal specifications and capabilities are exactly the same. However, the physical differences are obvious. So the main difference for me is this kind of form factor. If you prefer the wider, more square form factor, so that you have holding on one side, and absolutely and unquestionably the premium feel of the materials and craftsmanship is dominant and prevalent on the Note Air. There is absolutely no question about it. It feels like a more premium device, and for me personally, it makes me a little bit more happy. However, on the other hand, Note 3 is more subdued, it's less in your face and all that kind of stuff. It's more elegant, same type of rugged quality as well, but because it's not aluminium, it's a different type of magnesium and something else type of blend, it feels a little bit different in the hand, and I think that as such it's a little bit more elegant, if that's something that you prefer. So for me, Note Air is the fun one, and the Note 3 is the elegant, powerful one. And of course, there's a difference in thickness because Note Air is noticeably thinner than the Note 3. And here's that edges thing that I was mentioning. I do prefer that the edges on the Note Air are rounded equally from every side, so that when you're holding it, it is a little bit more comfortable than what we have here, which is still very nicely manufactured, and you have this normal kind of thing, but then you don't have this rounded top side, and that can, in some circumstances, not all the time, but under certain circumstances, it can be a little bit less comfortable than the Note Air it is. That's just my personal preference. So yeah, I'm sure that a lot of people will also say like, yeah, that this doesn't really bother me at all. I'm just fine with that, which is totally normal and fine. Now, Note 3 comes with the same 10.3-inch Mobius flexible screen, and the specifications say that it's the AG flat cover glass lens on top. So it's flush, there's no bezels or anything like that, there's no indentations. However, that means that it's a very similar type of feel like the Note Air. I'm not expecting some major differences between the writing experience between the two devices. Now, this Mobius flexible screen is a big difference between the Note Air and the Note 3, because Note Air is using the upgraded new HD Carta screen, and the difference should be visible in the Frontlight itself and the clarity of the text. Usually, e-ink Carta HD screens that are used on the Note Air are more clear and more crisp than the Mobius flexible screens. But however, Mobius flexible screens could be a little bit faster, I don't know, because when Boox is talking about their Note Air and the Note 3 devices, they're saying that if you want the most powerful and kind of writing-oriented device, Note 3 is better, and if you want a thinner, more chic and device with a little bit more clarity in the display, then the Note Air, because of its Carta HD screen, is better. So I'm going to be running the tests and comparing how does the Note 3 actually score on the D.E.S.T.A test, because that's interesting. They're two pretty much identical machines and using different screen technology, so we'll see how that reflects in the latency itself. Now, this is interesting. So I ran the D.E.S.T.A test on the Note 3 fully not knowing what to expect, because I knew that Note 2 was on the slower side of things. It was definitely slower than Remarkable 1, and it was actually slower than Nova 2, and I really didn't know where it will fit the Note 3 itself. So when I ran the tests, I always run like about 5 to 6 tests, sometimes even 10, and then I average out the results. And just to clarify, the results that are most important on the graph that you'll see now is basically the blue line, so the first contact, because the red one, the full line, that actually is more open to interpretation up to a point, so it's a little bit less reliable than the blue line, and the blue line is the one that you actually notice most. So let's just focus on that one. And Note 3 averaged out at around 55 milliseconds, which is basically almost as fast as Remarkable 1. So definitely good, and definitely faster than Note 2, and faster than Nova 2 for sure. So yeah, that was actually really good, but the more interesting result is actually Boox Note Air, which is underneath it, which has under the parentheses latest update. And if you remember, the initial Boox Note Air testing that I did on D.E.S.T.A was around 45 milliseconds, but since then we've had like a bunch of updates, like literally I think at least 3-4 updates, and that has actually had an effect on the latency. Not tremendously a lot, but a little bit. So it's around 6 milliseconds slower than it used to be before all of these updates. So now Boox Note Air today, at the same time when I was testing both of the devices under the same circumstances, it's around 51 to 52 milliseconds, which is still a tiny little bit faster than the Note 3. Definitely they're in a very similar ballpark. However, Note 3 is a little bit, consistently a little bit on the faster side of things. So as far as the writing speed goes, I think that it's very good. So it's not excellent, because the excellent part has to be 40 milliseconds or less. If you're looking for it, you will see a tiny little bit of latency. However, it really doesn't bother me. That's a very individual type of thing. So that's why I provide all the examples and all the data. So if you've used some of these devices, then you'll know actually what to expect. Now, as far as reflectivity goes, you can expect pretty much very, very similar things like on the Note Air as well. So let's just compare them here. And this is without the screen protector. So the screen protector will have a little bit of a better diffusion and everything else. But yeah, you can actually see Note Air here and the Note 3 here. Very, very type of a similar situation, though it does seem maybe, let me see. No, it does actually seem that the Note Air is tiny little bit more diffuse and less of an impact here as far as the intensity of reflection goes. That being said, I'm not having any issues when I'm working with this one. And again, it's a Frontlight powered device. So even if you do encounter a reflection of some sort, or not a reflection, but a bit of a glare, then you can always compensate that with the Frontlight. However, as I say, in the same case with the Note Air, I haven't yet ran into a situation where it was a problem. Usually it happens that if I sit down and there's like a light source directly behind me, and if I get a little bit of a glare, then I just simply swipe maybe a step up or 2 steps up of the intensity of the Frontlight, and it compensates, and that's gone. So very, very nice way to actually do these things, and for me that reflectivity isn't a problem. However, it's not a full on matte screen. This I think can be remedied with the screen protectors that can be used. However, as I said, this is a review loan device, so I'm not going to be applying the screen protector here. I've done that on the Note Air. You've seen the tests there. You can compare with this one and expect pretty much exactly the same stuff and behavior on the Note 3 as well. So let's now test out the writing experience, and how does it look like when you're writing, how does it sound, and how the latency is visually when writing on the Note 3. So let's zoom in and do that. I'm just gonna do now an immediate test between the two so that I can actually just tell you that. And yeah, of course, this is a test of Note 3, but I know that a lot of users are gonna be directly interested in the comparison of how the writing experience is, amongst other things, between the Note 3 and the Note Air. So might as well do it here. So I'm just gonna write a little bit here and there, and then let you know how it feels. I'm using the same standard old Boox pen that actually comes here with the normal Boox nib that's kind of high friction and all that kind of stuff. So let's check it out. Okay, no, there is a difference, and ever so slightly, Note 3 is a little bit more papery-like. So there is a difference between the two. Now we're talking about a very, very slight difference between these guys, but yeah, when I'm doing back-to-back testing, Note Air is a little bit more smooth and glassy, and Note 3 is a little bit less. Now, neither are close to the Remarkable 2 experience. However, as a complete package, I think it's important to put into context that this is a very, very good type of writing experience. So I really liked what I had on the Note Air, and I really like what I have on the Note 3 because it's slightly better. And I can only imagine that even with putting the screen protector on top as well, the paper-like screen protector, then that increases the experience even further. So yeah, the claim that they make that Note 3 is slightly more paper-like, definitely you can feel it and you can hear it as well when you do a back-to-back comparison. So this is the example of the distance from the tip of the nib down to the writing surface on the Note 3. And that compensation definitely works, and it's a big improvement to what we had on the old OS on the Note 2 when I was doing my initial review. So things have definitely changed. Now the distance between the actual surface and the screen is still present, so that's something that is there. However, the software compensation is really efficient when you actually start writing, so much so that when I'm writing here, let's just zoom in from a normal type of view. I'm just gonna zoom in all the way so that you can see here's the tip, and I'm writing, and you can see that it's pretty much exactly where you are. So you don't see that offset at all. And I'm just gonna try and film the same thing and give you a comparison between the Note Air and the Note 3. It feels like it's the same type of gap, but let's just see. So this is the Note Air. To my eyes, it looks like the gap is a little bit smaller. I don't know if that's just an optical illusion or not, and here is the Note Air, and that shadow that I see, maybe it's just a play of the shadow, but yeah, the impression is that it's a little bit different. So let's try and have them side by side and see what it looks like. So yeah, here they are side by side, and maybe it's a play of the shadow and the light, but to me it looks like that distance between the screen and the surface of the screen and the screen itself seems a little bit less on the Note Air. Now, I don't have a way to measure this. I'm thinking of a way how to figure that stuff out. However, I don't have that yet, so I don't know. This is simply a personal impression, and I try to actually film it so that you guys can see and yeah, judge on your own. And as it's already normal, and you know that from Note Air, drawing straight lines on the Boox platform is very normal and kind of straightforward. So no, we don't have any kind of jagged lines, and on the contrary, you also have that filtering. And I'm just gonna switch to speed mode so that we disable the post-processing that you have in the notebooks on the Boox platform, and I'm just gonna write a straight line here. And I'm going to press hard so that you can see what do we get. I was pressed very hard, and as you can see, it's a nice straight line, no jaggedness or anything like that. And let's check out the vertical, and the same story there as well. So all good. Because this is a Mobius flexible screen, a similar configuration like we had on Max Lumi, where my unit had that tiny little white pixel, and a couple of other people also mentioned. Again, this is a super difficult thing to find, and you can see it only in very specific circumstances, and that is totally maxed out Frontlight and a fully black background. That's the only time that you can actually try and see it. And I've spent the last 5 to 7 minutes going through this with the magnifying glass, and on this unit I don't have a single spot or anything resembling like that. So yeah, there are no screen defects that I can find on the Note 3, which is a great thing. Here is the front light on the Note 3. It's the same type of dual front light, so you have the orange front light all the way to the maximum, or the blue one, which is the daytime light, or they're calling it nighttime light, but I'm not, it should be the other way around anyway. And you're free to actually mix and match however you want, or of course you can link them and then change the intensity that way. Of course, the light can be fully turned on by either going to the minimum or by flipping the on-off switch here. It's very flexible because you can just dial in just a very light touch to kind of compensate for whatever conditions that you are in, which I think is a great thing. And yeah, it has a very big range, so it can get to be very glowy, as you can see on my hands. Quite strong. I don't know if that's something that you're looking for, but yeah, the capacity is definitely there. The uniformity, I think, is quite good, and usually I test that by going to, again, the black background, because any problems are going to be manifested and clearly seen. That's the most difficult thing for the Frontlight and the screen to do on the e-ink. And again, we have, it's much more uniform than on the Max Lumi, but you do have a little bit of a bleed down here. So we have this a little bit bluish tint on the other side. And let's see how does it perform this one. And let's refresh to have clean. So the uniformity of the orange light looks good, and the blue light seems good as well, but it looks like there's a little bit of non-uniformity towards the bottom. Similar story like on the Max Lumi. Overall, this is not something that I think you will notice in regular type of use. So for example, if I just do this like that and use it normally, I mean, in these types of conditions, and if you're, for example, reading a document or something like that, it's not something that you can notice. Even at higher intensities, I mean, we are now at kind of 60-70% and you still don't see it. It's only when you push it all the way to the max, then you see a little bit of a difference here. So overall, I think it's a good front light, but I don't think that it's as good as on the Note Air. So yeah, we have the Note Air on the left side and Note 3 on the right side, and yeah, there's definitely some difference here, and for me at least, Note Air is way more uniform as a front light, and it just gives a bit of a much crisper type of impression when reading under these conditions. So let's check out and see the uniformity in the black notebook. So I think we have, yes, so that's kind of open, and yeah, there you can see there's very little bleed here on the Note Air and quite a bit more on the Note 3, and that's a consequence of the yeah, different panels. So they're using different panel, and different type of front light has to be used under these conditions. However, that being said, they are very close, but the differences I think are important to actually mention so that people can decide which product is better for their needs. So the readability is really good, everything is fine, it's nice, crisp and sharp, and it all works good, but the contrast itself is not that good. It's not as good as it is on the Note Air. However, this being the Boox platform and you using the Neo reader, which has its super awesome contrast controls, I mean, you can always compensate for a little bit more contrast, and then you get that increased just on the text or just on the images. So it effectively, I don't think that it matters that much, but if we are just comparing the devices themselves, the capabilities of the screen and everything like that, I think I need to compare them on the same page, and if I do that, then the Note Air panel is a little bit more crisper and sharper. This is the Note 3, and I'm gonna frame the same exact text next to it so that you can see how it looks like on Note Air. And this is the Note Air. So I don't know how much the camera is picking that up, but you can see that the image quality is a bit more crisper, a bit more sharper, and the contrast is a little bit better. So definitely there is perceptible difference between the two panels. However, that being said, it's perfectly fine and it works as you would expect it to. So So we can also take a look at the images, and this is now Note 3, and they are also being rendered very nicely. And again, when coupled with the awesome control of the Neo reader, I think that you will never have a problem to customize and make a PDF or any EPUB to be as readable as you want it to be. So full range of control and definitely good enough quality, but when compared to the Note Air is a little bit sharper, a little bit crisper, and a little bit more of a contrast. Now, the battery test was, as expected, absolutely phenomenal. It was just kind of crazy, and up to a point where I think this might be the best performing battery life on a 10.3-inch device that I've seen so far. So basically, yeah, I run a couple of tests, and by now you know, test 1 is 1 hour of continuous writing, and then I measure out how much the consumption is. And Note 3 consumed, it was with half Frontlight on, and basically it was about 5% per hour, which means that you will get around 20 hours of continuous writing. So that's very, very, very good. And that was Wi-Fi and half of Frontlight on. Then I ran the second test, which is page flipping. I'm using the auto slideshow functionality of the Neo reader, and I run it in 3 types of modes. The normal one, which is Wi-Fi on, Frontlight at 50%, and then I let it flip pages for a while, and then I extrapolated the value. So in that normal type of consumption, so Wi-Fi on, Frontlight at half, it consumed around 1.33% per hour, with a projected expected range battery life of 75 hours of flipping pages and reading under that type of those types of conditions. Things get even crazier when you actually go to low, where I disabled the Wi-Fi, disabled Bluetooth, and disabled the Frontlight altogether. Then we get down to 0.88% per hour of battery consumption, with an expected battery life of 113 hours per charge. And when you turn everything on, so Frontlight on all the way to the maximum, Wi-Fi on, Bluetooth on, everything is on, then we go to 5.87% per hour, or expecting a total of 17 hours operating under those conditions. So for me, I think this is really, really good. But one thing that's definitely a huge show is that just how big of a consumer that Frontlight is. So if you don't have to use it pumped up at 100%, I mean, for me, 50% is already way too strong. So just be aware that that Frontlight slider is definitely the drain on your battery. So, because as you can see, the difference between normal and high consumption is basically the Frontlight intensity, and we get a huge difference in battery life performance. So something to keep in mind. However, overall, outstanding battery life.